I want to talk to you today about cities and energy, but first I want to start with a little story. It was 1979. I was in 4th grade at Brentwood Elementary School in Los Angeles, California, and across the street there was a Union 76 station. Those of you who grew up in Southern California may remember those. And I noticed something funny happening. There were some lines starting to form at the gas station, first 1 car, then 2 cars, then 3 cars, and pretty soon halfway around the block, and then all the way around the block. And all this time, all of our parents were kind of acting funny. They were beginning to act stranger and more irrational and a little bit on edge. And really struck me. I was like thinking, what is going on with all these adults? What I realized now in hindsight was there was an oil embargo, there was a coup in Iran, and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know any of that going on at that time. But what I did know, what I know now, is that that was really my first memory about energy. And I challenge you all to be geeky enough to have a first energy memory. That was one of the things that really actually inspired me to write this book, was thinking about the fact that energy is one of those things we really don't think about very much until, as Joni Mitchell says, you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? And energy is one of those things that's so important to society, it's so important to all of our lives, and we only really notice it when there's a crisis around it. And what was really interesting to me was the fact that we noticed it most in Los Angeles, right? Because Los Angeles, the home of the freeway, the home of the automobile, really, automobile culture for that matter, it makes sense that would be the place where parents were freaking out the most about all this rise in gas prices. But I want to take a digression here and move away from energy and talk briefly about hot dogs. For those of you who don't know who this is Takeru Kobayashi, world champion gurgitator. That means, for those of you who don't know, speed eater. He can eat 60 bratwursts in 10 minutes. Don't ask me how. That's really gross when you think about it. They pitted him against a bear, and he almost out-ate a bear in hot dogs. Let's not even get into the animal rights aspect of that. And so, anyway, but I chose to put this picture here because the amazing thing about Kobayashi is he weighs only 128 pounds. He's a skinny little guy. He can eat 60 bratwursts and still only weigh 128 pounds. So how is that, what it makes him like the town that I grew up in, Los Angeles? And the answer is they both have a high metabolism. And that might sound like a really good thing. We all like to, you see all these diet products on the commercials saying, this will increase your metabolism. In fact, what we don't realize is a high metabolism is a sign of inefficiency. It means you need a lot of resources to maintain a certain level of functioning. And we don't really realize that. But it's a wonderful way to think about our cities. It really helps to think about, and I'm an urban planner, I teach urban planning, and it really helps to humanize our cities, to anthropomorphize them. And when we do that, it makes it easier to address what's wrong with them. Now, the thing about a high energy metabolism city is that it's easy not to notice and easy not to really care when energy prices are low and energy is abundant. And that's all well and good. But the question is, will energy prices remain low? Will energy remain abundant? And I have no crystal ball. I can't see the future. If I did, I'd be making a lot more money than I am now. But what I can say is that there are two things going on in the world, and it's called supply and demand. And what we see is demand is increasing rapidly for energy all across the world, and we see that supply is having trouble keeping pace with it. And the reason is because essentially we've been dependent on fossil fuels for most of our lifetimes, for most of our energy, as much as we love renewables. And the easy-to-use stuff, the easy-to-access fossil fuels are slowly being used up. And I refer you to that image on the right there, where you see what 100,000 barrels per day of production looked like in 1901. It was spindle top, it was some old rickety wood and iron structures. That gave you 100,000 barrels per day. Today, 100,000 barrels per day is the $3 billion Perdido offshore oil rig, the deepest ever in the Gulf of Mexico. That is what I mean when I say supply is having trouble keeping up. And why does this matter for cities? It matters for cities because cities are always competing with each other for capital investment and so on and so forth to be vital. And countries are doing it too. And in the past, being energy efficient hasn't mattered at all. That doesn't factor into competition or competitive edge at all. But when we suddenly start seeing energy prices go up and up and up, which I really do think they're going to go up, we're going to start seeing inefficient cities and inefficient places are going to be at a big disadvantage, and it's going to be tough for them to catch up because there's a lot of places all around the world right now who are doing cutting-edge work in efficiency, and particularly in the United States, we're having trouble keeping up in that respect, and that's not good for business. So this is more than an environmental issue. So really quickly, I want to talk about what determines urban energy metabolism. And there's a whole bunch of things. There's buildings, for sure. The building stock of a city determines urban energy metabolism, and obviously that has interacts with climate. You know, hot places have a different energy footprint from cold places in terms of the way the fuels we use to heat our homes. And when I was writing my book, I got really super interested in air conditioning, actually. I wrote a whole chapter on the history of air conditioning, got a little obsessed with it. And this is a great old advertisement from the 50s about how you have to have an air conditioner or you're totally like some weirdo. And what's amazing is how much has transformed our country, that basically we went from having no air conditioning in 1950 to by 2008, 96% of southern households had air conditioning. What a monumental change that is, and think about what that means for the energy footprint of our country and our communities. In addition to buildings, one that we really don't think about much is water. Water requires a huge amount of energy to get into our cities and to process, to treat, and so on and so forth. This is the Central Arizona Project in Phoenix. And I want you to do a little thought experiment for a second. I want you to close your eyes and imagine taking one of those big, water cooler bottles and fill it with water. And of course, since this is TEDxMidAtlantic, it will be a reusable water bottle. And put it in your backpack and imagine going uphill with it and the thigh burn you feel from carrying that thing uphill. Imagine how much energy that takes. Now imagine 1 million gallons being sent 4,000 feet uphill, 4,000 feet uphill to get to the Los Angeles basin. And we're looking at the kind of energy burden that water entails. In Los Angeles, or in Southern California, with the California State Water Project, the big aqueduct that feeds all Southern California, at any given instant, the pumps that are driving that water uphill use as much electricity as all of the households in the entire city of Los Angeles combined. It's a staggering amount. The Edmonston pumping plant, I think, is just about the biggest energy user in the entire world. Another one is then transportation. We love our cars in this country for good reason. We've got some pretty cool cars, and we use a lot of gas. In fact, in the United States, we use as much gas as if you took a football field and extruded it 50 miles high into the sky. That's how much gas we use. Consequently, we use way more gas per capita than any other place just about in the world. And our transportation energy footprint is very high in this country for 3 reasons. One is mode, which is to say we use cars, and cars are the most inefficient way to get around. Transit, buses is a lot more efficient in terms of energy per capita. We use very low amount of transit compared to other parts of the world. It's about 3%. Look at Asia, it's close to 50% of the population is on transit. And we also have a high energy footprint for transportation because we live far apart and with sprawl, and in fact, because our cities are so sprawling, we tend to drive much further every day as a result. We also, because we're so car dependent, we get stuck in traffic a lot. We waste about 3 billion gallons of fuel a year being stuck in traffic, essentially. So let's go to the good stuff now. So what do we do about this? How do we start addressing this problem? And the number one thing I want to start with is by saying we need to stop thinking about this as just a simple technical fix and saying this is an engineering challenge or a technical challenge. We need to start thinking about this in a way that my 8-year-old or my 5-year-old would think about this, which is that I want to think about this like a treasure hunt, like an exploration. And that's the way we're going to start making progress, because what we need to do is we need to see there's inefficiency around us everywhere, and we need to see that easily remediable inefficiency and waste we see all around us in society, see that as the next oil deposit. In other words, let's stop prospecting for oil and let's start prospecting for efficiency, because it's everywhere, and it's like many Saudi Arabia's worth of energy out there waiting for us. And it's going to happen at multiple levels. At the individual building level, people are greening their homes all over the place, and sometimes it's fancy greening, like on the left we see there a passive solar home in Vermont, which is so tight and so efficient that it basically needs no fuel heat. It all gets heated by the sun. But it doesn't have to be expensive, and I'll direct you to a brief anecdote here. On the right, that's actor and environmental activist Ed Begley, who, when I talked to him for my book, he told me a story. He said that, he's done all sorts of amazing things to his house to make it as green as possible, spent a lot of money, but the most effective thing he ever did was a $10 piece of insulation to fill in a gap in his foundation. That did more to reduce his energy bill than all of the solar hot water, and all those kinds of things that he put in. So it doesn't have to be expensive. The next level is the neighborhood level. And what we see is we should be prospecting for what I call locational efficiency, that we have all of these neighborhoods. I just came from Baltimore, where we have thousands and thousands of vacant row homes, just literally steps from a vibrant downtown. We need to be looking for places that are centrally located, that are on infrastructure, and that are underinvested in, underutilized, and we need to start rebuilding those areas, which we're starting to do now in this country. And I point you in those top two images there, we see lower downtown in Denver, near where I live, which is one of the greatest success stories in the country about urban redevelopment. Now people who used to have to live in the suburbs can live right next to downtown, and they can forego all these car trips and live right on transit. The lower pictures are from Hammarby, a green development in Stockholm, which has done exactly the same thing. And if you're ever in Stockholm, you have to visit. It's an amazing thing. And the final level is we have to start thinking at the regional level, and this is the hardest level of all. This is where the biggest return on investment is for reducing our energy footprint, but it's also the hardest level to work at. And what we have to start doing is working with carrots and sticks. The carrots are providing alternatives to the car, alternatives to the long commute, and that means things like putting in transit. And believe it or not, that lower right picture, that's Los Angeles. How many of you knew Los Angeles has light rail and a subway? But we need to provide those kinds of carrots. Right? Another great carrot on the upper left is Copenhagen's amazing bike system, which has resulted in 37% of the people there commuting to work on a bicycle, which, by the way, I just recently started commuting to work on a bike. It's fantastic. But you also need some sticks. On the upper right, what we see is Stockholm's congestion cordon, which basically makes drivers pay when they go into the center of town during the most crowded times of the day, brought down traffic by 20%. You mix the carrots and the sticks, you can change behavior. It has to be regional. And I want to end by saying this all. Let's put it all in perspective. One thing that, when I wrote this book, I really sort of came away with a much more intimate sort of visceral sense of energy and how we use it. And I sort of did some calculations. What I found is that today, roughly about 25 minutes of minimum wage labor buys you a gallon of gasoline. The amount of energy that's contained in that gallon of refined gasoline is essentially as much energy as would be had from 200 hours of manual labor with a plow. That is an amazing thing to think about. What the point being, we are energy wealthy in this generation that we live in today. We are blessed with this incredible wealth of energy that the rest of human history never even had anything close to. If we really appreciate that, what it's going to allow us to do is to start thinking about how we're going to actually make things better, how we're going to move to the next level of efficiency, and how we're going to make our cities less hungry. Thank you very much.